Hello, everyone, our dear listeners, and also some viewers as well, because I know that this podcast is also seen by video. So, welcome to another episode of Immunotech Talks. And this is the podcast that we have created to share with you some of the insights and valuable information around leadership, science, business, personal development as well, and much, much more. And we are so happy and honored to have you here again, our dear listeners. My name is Vanessa Gomez, and I am more than honored and privileged to be your host for the day. And especially, let me tell you, because today we'll be discussing a topic that goes very deep in all of our hearts at Immunotech. So, this current month, we are honoring Dr. Gustavo Bounous and celebrating his birthday by remembering how his work became a true wellness revolution. And some of you, maybe if you are new here in this family, may be asking yourself, well, who is Dr. Bounous? Well, my friends, stay tuned for this talk because today we will be sharing details not only about Immunocal, but also about the story of his founder and discoverer, and also understanding the importance of his lifetime achievements and the legacy he left behind. So definitely this episode is going to be super interesting for all of you today. But of course, I can do this by myself. So I am not alone today. Actually, I am today with one of our most endeared chairman of Immunotech, and he's joining us today again. This is his second episode with us. So, let me give you a little bit of the introduction to our guest. He is the chairman of the Scientific Advisory Board at Immunotech, has a medical degree from the University of Calgary, chief resident at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, former director of the undergraduate program and director of emergency medicine resident training at McGill University in Montreal. More importantly, and this is a very interesting fact, he has written more books on the topic of glutathione, our body master's antioxidant, than all the other books available combined. Can you imagine that? He has also been an organizer of various international medical conferences, speaker, contributed immensely to the training of thousands of doctors, students, has been a member of the board of directors of numerous academic and medical institutions, dealing with politics and education, is frequently heard on radio and television around the world, talking about the role of glutathione in health and disease. So glad to have you here, Dr. Jimmy Gutman. Welcome to this episode. Again, we are so honored to have you here.
Oh, the honor is mine. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for inviting me to do this call.
Well, I know we have like a very interesting topic and a couple of minutes today. And I guess with the introduction, our listeners are very intrigued about today's episode. So why don't we start from the beginning, like from the very beginning? Share with us a little bit about the story and how did you meet Dr. Bounous and what was that relationship kind of?
Well, I was sitting in my office minding my own business when a patient burst in, really excited, and said, "Dr. Gutman, I've got something to show you, something that is potentially going to be able to treat cancer and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and boost the immune response." And he was going on. And I told him, "Look, it looks like you're reading off of a label of snake oil." And his answer to me was a big thud on my desk. And what that bang on my desk was 20 or 30 pounds of research articles. And he said, "Jimmy, you're going to go home and you're going to read these." Most of my patients don't talk to me that way, but he was an ex-professional boxer, so I took him seriously. And what he managed to do by leaving this pile of research was absolutely ruin the next 3 months of my life, because I couldn't stop reading them. I was going to the library, I was online, and what I was reading about was, of course, glutathione. And this literature was pretty much new to me. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And fortunately, the majority of these articles was written by a Dr. Gustavo Bounous. And with God shining on me, Dr. Bounous happened to live in Montreal, which was my hometown. So I arranged to meet Dr. Bounous, and I sat with him for 2 hours. And those 2 hours changed my life, because what I was hearing about was so profound, it was so important, that I decided to change my career and pursue this single molecule. And Dr. Bounous was kind enough to allow me to work with him. And that's how I met Dr. Bounous. Just the first meeting, he changed my life.
Wow. And you mentioned about, planting the seed on the research and all the studies, and that, I mean, from what I understand, he was willing to provide like open information to you as well. And I mean, how was that about, and how we can link that into the research on Immunocal, and how does that translate into the Immunocal research? Because we're talking about, okay, you start talking about glutathione and this molecule and everything, when that translates into Immunocal.
Well, he initially started his work. He was a surgeon, and he was interested in knowing why, if you take two patients, same age, same sex, same medical diagnosis, do surgery on them, why one of them would be home in a week and the other one would be in the intensive care unit for months. What was the factor or factors that differentiated the outcome between these patients? And Dr. Bounous, yes, being a genius, but the answer or the question was rather simple. Even a child could suggest it. Maybe it was something that they were eating. Maybe it was part of their diet. So Dr. Bounous started investigating different dietary substances in the outcome of these surgical patients. And of course, out of the food groups, the one that seemed to make the most sense, that had the most promise, were proteins. So he started collecting different proteins and different amino acids and putting them to the test. We kind of knew that it would have something to do with the immune system, but back then, immunology wasn't even an accepted specialty. So we got a new postgraduate PhD candidate at McGill University, who is a superstar in this new field of immunology called Dr. Patricia Kongshaven, which perhaps we should have a conversation about some other day. And so
Agree.
they started looking at different amino acids and proteins on its effect on the immune system. And with some interesting results, but nothing groundbreaking. One day, this box arrives on Dr. Bounous' desk. And in this box is this fine white protein powder. And attached to it is a note, dear Dr. Bounous, this protein powder is a byproduct of one of our industries in Europe. And we've been dumping it in the rivers, we've been dumping it in the fields. And the local governments have told us to stop doing this because the fields were overgrowing and the rivers, the plant life was overgrowing. We know that you're studying proteins. Maybe you could find some practical use for this. So Dr. Bounous, of course, the box also had a check of $10,000 attached to it. Figured, okay, I'll put it into my experiments. And lo and behold, in a couple of years, we noticed that there were a group of laboratory animals that were living between 30 and 50% longer than the others. I mean, this was astounding. It's not like we were stretching out their lifespans, but they weren't dying quickly from infectious disease, from cancers that ran endemic in their populations. And this was truly exciting, and we got a lot more attention paid to this. And this was the very beginnings of a focus on this type of protein specifically, which ultimately developed into what we call Immunocal.
And well, wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, do you think that at the end we can kind of link glutathione immunocal to this longevity and healthy aging process?
That was the big question. Why were these animals so resistant to major diseases? One day, Dr. Bounous and Dr. Kongshaven are having a coffee in the research center. And they were joined by another researcher who, again, at the time was a very young PhD, who had been reading about glutathione. And this was a relatively new topic. And Dr. Bounous explained to him what was going on with these animals. And he said, maybe this protein that you've had such success with raises glutathione. And they did the testing. And as it turns out, they were right. So now, having in hand an explanation why this protein powder had this marvelous effect on animals, then really they could continue their research in a much more focused way. And so they started to look at diseases that were related to glutathione. One of these diseases, now we're into the 1980s, one major disease at the time that took everybody's attention in the early 80s was AIDS, or HIV. Mm-hmm. And a group of researchers in California noted that HIV positive or AIDS patients were by definition glutathione deficient. So, of course, what do? You set up a study to see whether this protein powder can raise glutathione in HIV/AIDS patients. This was actually our first human study. The work that we did was exciting, but to do a human study, you can't just decide to do a study. You need to go through boards of ethics and other research boards. And AIDS at the time was a deadly disease. If you had AIDS, it was essentially the kiss of death. Fortunately, these days, we have much better treatments for AIDS patients. But back then, if you had the diagnosis, you were going to pass away. And so the Board of Ethics said, okay, these patients are going to die anyways. Have fun with your white protein powder. It was really their decision. And not only did we have fun, but we had major, impressive, positive outcomes on these patients, some of which who weighed 80 or 90 pounds, we would be getting them back to work. And we were looking at things like viral load, which we decreased with the specific parameters that were measured, called a CD4 lymphocyte count, which were improving. And so this work put us on the map. It put Dr. Gustavo Bounous' name on the world map, along with Dr. Kongshaven, because we were getting calls and we were getting assistance and we were getting help worldwide. So the entire AIDS research community was paying attention to Immunocal at that time. And this opened up the door to getting much more funding. The Canadian government started funding us, and the papers started multiplying like crazy.
That's amazing. And we're going to go through another topic more on what happens after all the discovery, but can you share, like, super quickly, just the number of research studies that we have currently on Immunocal, like an approx?
Well, we have a book out that contains all of the studies that mention Immunocal. I put this together a couple of years ago, and there are 85 clinical
Wow.
papers done in top world recognized journals.
Exactly.
This is very rare to find about a natural product that has papers written on the product specifically and published. I don't know of any other nutraceutical company that even comes close to this.
Close.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah.
No, and I really wanted to share that because I mean we were talking about these days where we were just having one and now having this availability of the product. So at the end is you have shared with us like gold information around science and around the product and the research. And definitely we feel privileged as a company, as Immunotech, to have it, the product and Immunocal in our hands, available to us. But talking a little bit about this availability and the intention of really transforming lives with the discovery, can you share with us what was Dr. Bounous' biggest goal or dream after this discovery?
Well, it wasn't until we started looking at other areas besides the immune system when Dr. Bounous developed his dream. We went from infectious disease like AIDS to hepatitis to bacterial infections, but then we moved on to many other areas, in particular oncology, the study of cancer, where we had again astounding results. And then from cancer, we moved on to lung disease and asthma and cystic fibrosis and pulmonary fibrosis. And then we moved to cardiac issues and we covered so many medical topics, and it became clear to Dr. Bounous that this was really quite profound and quite wide reaching. And he was a very humble man. He was a very, very humble man. But he said that he would like to see this product in every household so that the common man can benefit from this. And initially, we had pharmaceutical companies look at this product because it had the research done just like you would on any other drug, but it happened to be a natural product. And Dr. Bounous cared less about money than he cared about helping humanity.
Wow.
So we chose the route of a natural product. If Immunocal would have been a drug, it would probably cost at least $500 or $600 a box, which is really not sustainable for most people. So we went the natural route, and so that was his dream, to see a box in every kitchen
Wow.
available.
It is a great, of course, a beautiful, but also a laudable purpose, like putting a lot of work just to make sure that everyone can benefit from it. And I would say thank you for choosing this path, for choosing the path of availability, of choosing the path of service, and choosing the path of really the intention of transforming lives out there. And thank you for choosing also Immunotech and being this, the vehicle for making that a reality. How do you think, or how well do you think Immunotech has done in fulfilling this dream? And also, how can we do it better, all of us?
Well, when you look at our beginnings, nobody had heard of glutathione. Maybe an emergency physician, maybe a liver specialist, maybe a toxicologist. But when we would talk to doctors back at the beginning, glutathione was a completely new word. Here we are Many years later, remember, Dr. Bounous started his research from 45 years ago. Today, every doctor has heard of glutathione. Almost every doctor has heard of glutathione. And if they haven't, in the next 3 or 4 years, they will. When Dr. Bounous started his research, there were really not many research articles on glutathione. Today, 2023, there are over 175,000 articles that mention glutathione. Now, that just is, for most people, is a number. So let me put that in context. If you look up the amount of medical articles on PubMed on vitamin C, there are maybe 40 or 50,000 articles on vitamin E, maybe 60,000 articles. So vitamin C and vitamin E are pretty well known, are pretty popular. There are more articles on glutathione than there are in vitamin C and vitamin E put together. So this is a huge amount of information in the scientific community that is going to filter down into the common knowledge. There's always a delay between what appears in science and what appears in everyday news. But I'm quite confident in saying that it was Dr. Bounous' work that was the majority of the influence on the scientific and medical community to develop this topic. Before Dr. Bounous made the link between glutathione and the immune system, nobody knew about it. Before we started doing research on glutathione and cancer, nobody knew about that. These were all groundbreaking, pioneering work by our scientists. The reason why glutathione is so popular today is in part because of our research, Immunotech's research.
Amazing, amazing, and thank you, because at the end, what I can kind of summarize from this is there's a lot to do yet, and there's a lot of work that we need to do together to really fulfill and accomplish that dream as a whole, as a purpose. Just a final thought, Dr. Gutman. After all this year, having witnessed, the birth of this research and the birth of Immunocal and the birth of glutathione, and having seen also the birth and the growth and everything, do you think there's a legacy behind that for the future and the future generations?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there's a legacy. Not only the influence that Dr. Bounous had on the rest of the scientific community, contributing to having people work and develop 175,000 articles. Despite Dr. Bounous having passed away, this number increases month by month. The aspects of glutathione on the immune system are now being well taken care of. We have made great strides in glutathione and cancer. Again, this is a wealth of information that people are still investigating. And more recently, we've been looking at the brain, so which is a newer topic and is now really a topic of great attention. So even despite Dr. Bounous having passed away, his legacy lives on, and these new papers that are looking at the brain, of course, you will find papers by Dr. Bounous, by Dr. Kongshev, and by Dr. Dro referenced as a basis for the development of these new ideas. So this is going to continue on for many, many years.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I guess time's up for today. But as you were saying, glutathione, Dr. Bounous vision, this higher purpose is more alive and relevant than ever. And there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of lives to be transformed, and there's still of homes to have Immunocal boxes in. So let's work for it. Dr. Goodman, thank you so much for being here with us again, for showing up and serves us with this valuable information. I think service is what we receive from you today. So hope to have you again soon and
My
definitely another
absolute
episode.
pleasure. Yes.
And to our audience today, if you found value in this episode, please make sure to share it with others. See you in the next one.